Motorcycles are already a challenge between the weather, the traffic, the maintenance, and the constant risk of getting hit by someone texting in a minivan. But what really makes riding a nightmare in some states? The laws. Not just the rules you expect, but the ones that make no sense, weren't written for bikes, or seem designed to punish riders for just existing. Some are outdated, some are vague, some are so poorly written that even the cops enforcing them don't fully understand how they work. And the others? They just flat out ruin the riding experience. So today we're calling them out. These are the laws, state by state, coast to coast, that turn motorcycling from a passion into a paperwork nightmare. Laws that should have been updated years ago. Laws that frustrate riders more than they protect them. Because when the law works against the people it's supposed to protect, it's time for a rewrite. Number 1. You must keep both hands on the handlebars at all times. Yes, even at a stoplight. This one shows up in multiple states, including Texas, New Jersey, and parts of the Midwest. And it's just as dumb as it sounds. The law literally says riders must keep both hands on the handlebars while operating a motorcycle. Not while speeding, just at all times. That means if you stop at a red light and adjust your gloves, scratch your face, wave at another rider, or, God forbid, reach down to check your phone mount, you've technically broken the law. And yes, some cops do enforce it. Usually as a catch-all if they want a reason to pull you over. Now here's the kicker. Cars don't have this rule. You can steer with one hand while sipping a latte and adjusting the AC, and it's totally fine. But if you remove one hand for a second on a motorcycle, you're suddenly riding unsafe. The law is a joke because it treats every rider like they're incapable of multitasking. It doesn't allow for context or reality. It assumes that removing a hand for any reason is automatically dangerous. Should you be riding around one-handed all the time? Of course not. But if you can't scratch your nose without risking a ticket, your state needs to chill. Number 2. No lane filtering allowed, even in dead-stopped traffic. Picture this. You're sitting in 100-degree heat, fully geared up on a bike that's radiating enough heat to cook a steak. Traffic is completely stopped. Not crawling, stopped. You've got a clear path between the lanes, but in 49 out of 50 states, you're not allowed to move. Unless you're in California and, to a limited extent, Utah or Arizona, lane filtering is outright banned. That means you're legally required to sit in traffic like a four-wheeled vehicle, roasting in your gear, risking rear-end collisions, and wasting fuel, all in the name of safety. And it's not just annoying, it's dangerous. Bikes don't have crumple zones. When you're rear-ended on a bike, you're going flying. Filtering reduces that risk. It reduces congestion. It even improves traffic flow. That's why it's legal and encouraged in most of Europe and Asia. But here, if you try to filter through a jam just to cool your clutch and save your leg from melting, you can get slapped with tickets for lane splitting, unsafe passing, or improper lane use. And if a driver swerves to block you, which happens all the time, they're often not even cited. This law needs to go. Filtering isn't reckless when done properly. What's reckless is forcing bikers to sit still in dangerous traffic while pretending we're in steel cages like everyone else. Number 3. Emissions testing for motorcycles that don't even have emissions equipment. Welcome to states like California, where your motorcycle might be subject to emissions testing, even if your bike doesn't have the kind of emissions control systems that cars do. The logic? Thin. The enforcement? Inconsistent. The frustration? Off the charts. Motorcycles contribute a tiny fraction of vehicle emissions on the road, but in some states, they still get lumped into the same inspection requirements as cars. And it's not just for a tailpipe sniff test. Some bikes get flagged for visual inspections, where techs check for original exhaust systems, catalytic converters, and even tamper-proof stickers. Missing a stock part? Fail. Got a high-flow air filter? Fail. Exhaust too loud even if it's OEM? You guessed it, fail. Here's the kicker. Many bikes never had catalytic converters to begin with. Some weren't required to. But that doesn't stop inspectors from enforcing rules that assume every machine is emissions equipped. The techs don't know, the DMV doesn't care, and you're stuck trying to explain that your bone stock 2003 Suzuki didn't come with a canister system. This kind of law turns basic maintenance into a guessing game. Want to pass inspection? You better have a copy of your bike's original factory emissions schematic, because the burden of proof is on you. And for riders who build customs or restorations, it's a legal nightmare just to keep your registration current. Number 4. Parking laws that treat motorcycles like full-size trucks. You find an open spot downtown, you nose your bike into it, shut off the engine, and here comes the parking enforcer with a ticket, because your bike isn't parked correctly. In a lot of cities, motorcycles are subject to the exact same parking rules as full-size vehicles, which makes zero sense when you're taking up a fraction of the space. Some places require you to park parallel to the curb like a car, even if the angle makes your bike unstable. Others fine you for parking at an angle, or backing in, or for sharing a space with another bike, even if you're both tucked in neatly with room to spare. And God help you if you put 2 bikes in 1 paid meter space. That's a citation for each because technically, only 1 vehicle is allowed per payment. It gets worse when you're just trying to avoid theft. Want to park your bike on the sidewalk near a shop window out of the way? Boom. Illegal vehicle placement. Doesn't matter if it's completely clear and hurting no one. If a car can't do it, you can't either. This law punishes common sense. Bikes should be encouraged to park efficiently. Instead, we're fined for not pretending to be the size of a Chevy Suburban. And in states where space is tight, that's not just annoying, it's absurd. Number 5. You're required to use a helmet, but the law doesn't define what counts as one. Sounds like a joke, right? But in several states with helmet laws, the requirement is simply that you wear a helmet, with zero clarification on what that means. No mention of DOT certification, no safety standard reference, no guidance at all. And that creates a dangerous gray area for both riders and law enforcement. In practice, this means riders can, and do, get away with wearing novelty lids, construction helmets, bicycle helmets, or even fake DOT sticker specials from gas stations. And unless the officer knows how to spot a real helmet versus a phony, they can't prove anything on the spot. Meanwhile, riders who are wearing proper gear can still get harassed if the cop thinks their helmet looks sketchy. It's a bad law from both ends. It lets bad actors get away with dangerous gear, and it puts responsible riders at the mercy of subjective judgment. Worst of all, in the event of a crash, your insurance might argue your helmet wasn't compliant if the law is vague, and try to reduce or deny your medical payout. The fix is simple. Require certified helmets recognized by a safety standard, DOT, ECE, SNELL, and spell it out in the law. But as it stands, the wording in many states is so loose it protects no one and penalizes everyone. Number 6. Temporary tags are a mess for motorcycle buyers. You buy a used bike from a private seller, you shake hands, get the title, and ride it home legally. Right? Not always. In some states, motorcycles don't qualify for temporary tags, or worse, the DMV doesn't issue them at all for private sales. That means you're technically not allowed to ride the bike at all until the full title and registration process is completed. It's that kind of nonsense that makes zero sense in the real world. A guy buys a car and gets 30 days to get everything sorted. Guy buys a motorcycle, he has to haul it home in a truck, sit on it a week or two, and wait for paperwork to clear because taking it on the road without plates or tags is considered operating an unregistered vehicle. And even in states that do allow temp tags for bikes, the process is often not online. You have to go to a DMV in person. Maybe wait a few days for an appointment, just to get a little piece of paper that says you can ride what you already paid for. If the system worked, it would encourage legal ownership transfers. Instead, it pushes people to either risk it or park a perfectly rideable bike until the state gets around to acknowledging it exists. Number 7. Some states still require you to retest if you let your M endorsement expire. So you let your motorcycle endorsement lapse. Maybe life got busy. Maybe you weren't riding for a few years. Maybe your state didn't remind you. No big deal, right? You've had the license for years. You'll just pay a renewal fee and move on. Wrong. In certain states like New York, Michigan, and others, if your M endorsement expires, even for a short time, you're treated like a brand new applicant. That means starting the process over. Written test, vision test, skills test, waiting periods. And yes, that can include retaking a full DMV road exam on a bike, even if you've been riding for decades. It's not just inconvenient, it's insulting. The logic behind it is that riding skills degrade over time, which is fair if you've been out of the saddle for years. But most riders don't suddenly forget how to ride when a card expires in the mail. And in many cases, they've been riding the whole time, they just didn't notice the endorsement expired. This policy doesn't encourage safety. It punishes oversight, and worse, it can scare people into riding illegally just to avoid the hassle of retesting, which defeats the whole purpose of licensing in the first place. Letting your license lapse shouldn't feel like getting demoted to rookie status. It should be a fine, a slap on the wrist, not a forced do-over. Number 8. Some states require you to register a bike before you can get insurance, and vice versa. This is one of the most backward legal loops riders can get trapped in. You need proof of insurance to register your bike, but you need registration to get insurance. It sounds like something out of a bad comedy sketch, but it's a real problem in states with poorly coordinated DMV and insurance systems. You go to the DMV to register your newly bought bike, and they ask for proof of insurance. Fine. So you call your insurer to set up the policy, and they say, "We need the registration or plate number to activate coverage." And now you're stuck in an administrative death spiral. Can't register without insurance, can't insure without registration. This trap is especially common with salvage bikes, custom builds, or bikes bought out of state. Even if you have the title in hand, you can't legally ride or insure it until you figure out how to break the loop. Some riders get around it by calling smaller local insurance agents who will issue a temp policy. Others just ride insured until everything clears, which is obviously illegal and risky as hell. The law should protect riders, not trap them in bureaucratic nonsense. But in a lot of states, this outdated system turns a simple process into a frustrating game of prove it before we help you. Number 9. Some states have no plate standards for front-facing cameras or red light systems. Let's say you roll through a yellow light that turns red as you exit the intersection. You weren't speeding, you weren't reckless, but a red light camera snaps a photo, and guess what? It can't see your plate because your bike doesn't have a front one. So now you're getting a ticket by default, or worse, the system misreads another plate and sends the fine to the wrong person. In many states, traffic enforcement systems are built around cars, not bikes. They're programmed to detect front plates, which motorcycles don't have. And instead of adapting the tech or excluding motorcycles from automated citations, some areas just let riders get swept up in the mess anyway. There have been documented cases where riders get ticketed based on blurry side angles, wild guesses by software, or even wrong-way plate matches from the photo. Good luck fighting it. Most cities make it intentionally hard to contest camera tickets, and you'll rarely speak to a real person. And even in states that say, "We don't issue red light tickets to motorcycles," guess what? If the system logs your plate at all, you still get the notice. It's on you to challenge it, and most people don't because it's a nightmare of forms, fees, and DMV limbo. Bikes should either be excluded from these systems or held to a standard they can actually meet. Until then, it's just more proof that laws were never built with motorcycles in mind. Number 10. Riders can still be charged with reckless driving for simply accelerating too fast. You're at a light. It turns green. You roll on the throttle, maybe a little brisk, maybe just enough to leave that lumbering SUV behind. You're not speeding, you're not wheeling, you're not weaving. But in some states, that quick burst of acceleration can be labeled reckless driving by any cop who feels like flexing the statute. That's because the law in many places defines reckless driving with vague language like exhibitionist speed, rapid acceleration, or display of power. In other words, totally subjective. One officer might see normal riding, another might see a stunt show, and once that citation is written, good luck talking your way out of it. It gets worse if your bike is loud, or if it's a sport bike, or if your jacket has a flashy logo. Now you're not just taking off a little quick, you're riding dangerously. That charge can carry serious fines, points on your license, and even the threat of license suspension depending on how hard the judge wants to go. It's a perfect example of how motorcycle laws often punish perception, not behavior. The law doesn't care if your bike has short gears and just feels fast off the line. If someone decides you look like trouble, you're in trouble. Until the law defines reckless riding by actual metrics, this one's going to keep screwing riders who weren't doing anything wrong. Number 11. Some states require a passenger to have their own foot pegs, even if they don't use them. Sounds reasonable at first, until you realize how many bikes, especially older or custom models, either don't have passenger pegs installed or use integrated setups that don't exactly meet the letter of the law. And in states like Florida, Virginia, and several others, the law is brutally clear. If you're carrying a passenger, they must have separate functional foot pegs. No pegs? That's a citation. Now here's the kicker. The law doesn't care if your passenger is fine standing on the frame, or if you're two up for just a short distance, or if you're doubling back with a buddy after a breakdown. If they don't have pegs under their feet, you're in violation. Some cops enforce this like it's a safety crusade. Others won't bat an eye. But when the law is black and white, it gives anyone the authority to write you up, whether the pegs were missing or just not clearly visible. And don't think folding pegs or aftermarket solutions will save you unless they're bolted on and ready to use. It's another case of a blanket rule to apply to every bike on the road without acknowledging different setups or circumstances. Yes, passengers should have secure footing, but this law gets enforced with zero flexibility. Number 12. In some states, you can't sell a bike without first paying all the back registration fees. You got a bike that's been sitting for a few years. Maybe it's a project. Maybe it was parked after a crash. You finally decide to sell it. But before the DMV will transfer the title, they want you to pay every single year of missed registration fees. Even if the bike wasn't ridden. Even if the bike wasn't insured. Even if it didn't even run. Welcome to California and a few other states that treat registration like a subscription, not a usage fee. Doesn't matter that the bike hasn't touched the road in years. You owe them. And until it's paid in full, you're stuck holding a title you can't legally transfer. This screws over both sellers and buyers. A buyer might find a great deal on a garage find bike, only to learn they owe $400 in back fees just to put it in their name. And the seller, they either have to eat that cost themselves or explain why the DMV is about to throw a wrench into the deal. There's usually no grace period, no non-operational status backdating, and no way to negotiate it down. If you didn't file the right form at the right time, the DMV assumes your bike was on the road, and they want their money. It's a money grab disguised as policy. And for riders trying to get old bikes back on the road, it's one of the most frustrating roadblocks out there. Most of these laws weren't written by riders, that much is obvious. They're outdated, inconsistent, and in a lot of cases, flat out dangerous. And if you've ever been fined, hassled, or stranded because of one, you know exactly how infuriating it is to get punished for something that makes no sense. So which of these laws have you dealt with personally? Or is there one in your state that's even worse? Drop it in the comments. I want to hear how the systems failed you. And if you want more no BS content that tells it like it is, hit that like button and subscribe. We're just getting started. Ride smart, stay legal, and keep fighting the good fight, because these laws sure won't fix themselves.